Hello everybody, my name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. We got a fun video for you today. Yesterday on the Steve Deace show, I posted a buy-seller hold on Eschatology, and we're going to discuss Steve Deace's reaction. And I got to tell you, it is not every week I get a buy-seller hold selected, and I'd like to send some fiery or spicy takes to them to put on for the show. They never usually do. It's been a while since I've had buy-sell hold selected, but this one was hot and spicy and selected for the show and discussed widely. And it's on Eschatology. It's hot. It's a hot take, and I don't usually do a whole lot of like hot theological takes here on Evangelical Dark Web. Despite the name, you would think I would do it more often. And maybe when I began this, I wanted to do that more often, but since I've really just come to the conclusion that I'm just here to arm the saints with knowledge for spiritual warfare. That's kind of my role in the grand scheme of YouTube and stuff like that. So, but occasionally I will debate eschatology. I did it with Berean Babes on my live stream with her last month, and now we're going to debate eschatology here on Evangelical Dark Web. So this is a Steve Deace show from Wednesday, the 14th of September, 2022, obviously. And here we go.
At this point, you should be, if you're a Notre Dame fan, feel fortunate if you get to 7 wins.
Bye-bye.
Don't forget to like the channel.
Next, we go to Raymond Fava, who
backwards.
says America has blessed the nation-state of Israel for 75 years and in return has experienced an increase in lasciviousness akin to the Roman Empire, which sacked Jerusalem. There is no theological or eschatological significance to the modern nation-state of Israel. I don't think he says our relationship, he's not trying to say our relationship with Israel has caused us to decline. He's just saying there's no actual link between a nation's blessing and blessing Israel.
And that is the premise. And that is a core premise of dispensationalism. Premillennial dispensationalism does posit that America must bless Israel in order to receive the blessing of God. That is a belief among dispensationalists. For instance, in 2019, Pat Robertson famously said that Trump was in danger of losing the mandate of heaven for actions that he took in Syria. He pulled support from Syria despite the fact that that move actually worked out in some ways. He pulled support from the Kurds in Syria, which in turn forced the Kurds to negotiate with the Syrian government and Russia and people like that. So it actually worked out better for the Kurds and continued American reliance. But nonetheless, Pat Robertson decided to weigh in on foreign policy and say that Trump was in danger of losing the mandate of heaven, and it all has to do with his views on the end times and how Israel is significant. I believe there is some eschatological significance to Kurdistan or the Kurds because they are, I believe, the descendants of the Medes, and Media and Persia are separated or something like that. So it's been a while since I've read an eschatology book that explained this. About 5 years or so. But that is an actual dispensationalist held view. And I'm attacking that view straight on by saying the fruit of this theology isn't there. In fact, it's wrong. And America is not the only nation to have blessed Israel in the last 75 years or so. France was probably the first ally of Israel. They kind of betrayed them, though. Or not just France, the Soviet Union was an ally of Israel, I believe. They were closer to the Soviets for a while. And Iran briefly was kind of friendly with Israel. This would have been during the time of the Shahs, who were pretty anti-Islamic. And that's why they were overthrown in 1979, it was because they were anti-Islamic, not anti-freedom, anti-Islamic. So the history, how many nations have blessed Israel and been blessed in return? What we actually see is that most nations are in a state of decline as a result of America and Western culture declining.
Zip, zilch, nada. Whenever we get into eschatology conversations, which I am more willing to entertain in the era in which we live now than I ever have been in my career. But you have to remember, All right. I'm no expert, but you are talking to someone that has studied more than one view, has studied several of them. And so in general, if you give me an absolutist position like this, whether it's the Schofield Bible position, which we call premillennial dispensationalism, or it's the position that you are giving, which is some form of postmillennial preterist view, I'd have to further flesh out your viewpoint.
It's not postmillennial. Just want to be clear. I'm just stating that Israel has no theological significance. The nation state of Israel. The church is Israel.
To know precisely where you stand. If you take an absolute dogmatic statement with me, I'm going to sell on its face. And that's why I'm going to sell here.
Can I see that there's no I'm looking over your shoulder. Significance to the... Well, broadly speaking, I will buy. I think it situationally...
Todd's a Catholic, by the way.
Perhaps I would, if you gave me something more focused, I might change that. But broadly speaking, and it doesn't seem like you're trolling here.
No, I don't think he's trolling. Right? So I'll be more specific for you. When you tell me theological, that's what's going to prompt me to sell in this particular statement. Okay? You can't, I don't know how you could possibly make a case that there has been no theological implication to the rechartering of Israel. There's been a ton of them. A lot of people view that as a meaningful eschatological statement within their own theologies and have acted accordingly. You see what I'm saying? Even if you don't share those views, the idea that it's had no theological significance is a complete canard. It's had a ton of theological significance. We have made arguments for foreign policy based on people's theological views. To say there's no theological significance in and of itself is a canard.
But he's making a way more meta statement than that.
Then he should be better with his terms. If he wants to say there's no biblical significance or eschatological significance, now I don't agree with that argument either, but if that's your position, that would be a better restating of your position. There's no way you can argue there's been no theological significance. It's one of the most theologically significant events of the last 200 years, regardless of your eschatological views.
But if it's always wrongly theological...
He didn't put that qualifier on it either.
I know, but come on. I mean,
I don't know. He did not. He did not. And so you don't roll in the tribes I do. You're going to make dogmatic statements on this and ask me to sign on and then take all your grief for it. You better come a lot more precise and specific than that before I take on your baggage. Thank you very much.
But his point is that he's not going to take on their baggage.
That's the premise of the entire... I'm not... If I have to reset your premise, then your argument's bad. If I have to define it.
That's subjective. That's not fair.
I don't think it's subjective at all. I've already pointed out there's tons of theological significance to this event, regardless of your views.
There's priests and pastors saying that there's theological significance to transing your kid. That they can say that's a theological discussion. They're devils.
Okay, well, that's true, but he didn't say correctness or exactness. He said significance. That's his argument. He argued it's not significant.
I was wondering why you were... I guess theological or eschatology is not really the key word here. It's significance.
Yes. It's an extraordinarily significant event, regardless of the views you have. We have shaped foreign policy around people's beliefs of its significance. Again, regardless of the beliefs that you have.
So the key fallacy here is that perceived significance does not equal actual significance. People can think that an event is theologically significant. People thought that, 1884 was a theologically significant year and thus led to the Great Disappointment. That's where we get Seventh-day Adventists from, or at least that's where they started out, the Millerites. The Great Disappointment. They thought that 1844 was a theologically significant year. And just because people believe something is theologically significant does not mean that it necessarily is. This is a very postmodern mindset to believe that I feel like this is theologically significant, therefore it is. Even if you end up writing a bunch of jargon or dogma to back this up, it doesn't make it theologically significant, because who determines what is theologically significant? God does. God determines what is theologically, specifically eschatologically significant. Eschatology is a subcategory of theology. Theology being the study of God. Eschatology being the study of end times. I am positing that Israel has no theological, or the nation state of Israel, to be clear, has no theological or eschatological significance, meaning that in the grand scheme of Christ's return, the nation state of Israel, the physical nation state of Israel that exists today, has zero significance in that. And that is relative to any other nation. They have no special significance. Now, if you want to say that's wrong, if that's not your eschatology, then just say that's not your eschatology and sell. But let's not act like the statement wasn't clear. We don't get to determine what theology is significant or not. God does. God gave us scripture. And, dispensationalism is the least supported eschatological view in scripture. It is the least supported. Of the four major views, historic premill, amill, postmill, and dispe premill. Dispe premill is the least supported. And, if you want to throw in the subcategory of mid-trib, which is usually dispe premill as well, also, that might be even less, but that's still a subcategory of dispe premill. So that's, and I'm glad Todd backed me up on that. The Catholic was backing me up because, he's presumably amillennial. So, these things, he would agree with me on theology, or not agree with me on theology, but he would obviously not agree with the dispensational view. And it's just an interesting little instance. It's an interesting little story. I like starting little arguments like this. I believe that the conservative movement and Christianity in general, but the conservative movement needs to have a conversation about Israel, because Israel, obviously you see the people at TPUSA wielding American and Israeli flags, and that's just un-American. Like, you cannot say that you're American first and wave an Israeli or Ukrainian or Taiwanese or Mexican flag. Like, that's not American first. And I think the conservative movement needs to have that conversation, which is why I posited that question. Like, I'm trolling to start an argument, not necessarily to make people mad. But in general, I do believe that dispensational theology is unfounded in Scripture and has dangerous byproducts if you follow down the rabbit hole, because you get people that do not think that the Jewish people need Christ. You get that. And that's largely because of dispensationalism. You get that distinction. And what I'm arguing against is the distinction, because, we can make a few arguments here. First, if you were to 23andMe the people of modern day Israel, I don't think you're going to have a whole lot of, you're going to have a dubious lineage to Abraham. Let's just say that. You're going to have a dubious lineage to Abraham. That's just a historical fact. Secondly, Israel in the Bible is the church. Going forward is the church. Israel, not everyone who's of Abraham is of Israel. In fact, most of the Old Testament Israel is in hell right now, because most of the, back when they had prophets in the temple and all that, they still disobeyed God far more often than they actually obeyed God. So going forward, we have a new covenant that, people don't fall through the cracks in this new covenant. And it's a beautiful covenant. So I definitely weigh more on covenant theology than dispensational theology. So anyway, we need to have these types of arguments in evangelicalism, especially because I believe that dispensationalism has been a dangerous theology to some degree. Not the most dangerous, But if I'm coming up with a top 10 list of dangerous theologies, or if I want to stratify that list and say top 10 most dangerous theologies that are still under the pyramid of orthodox, dispensationalism is top 5. I think, and I get that it's an eschatology view. No one's not saved for believing in a certain eschatological view. But I will say, if your dispensationalism, presumably pre-trib, because that would make the most sense with dispensationalism, how do you argue that a pre-trib rapture is not a second coming of Christ that also has a second coming of Christ? Like, that's 2 second returns of Christ instead of the one that the Bible talks about. Anyway, we could point out a lot of problems with that theology, and I do think you are seeing a decline in dispensational theology in the United States, and I think that post-millennial theology is scarfing that up, and that theology is the biggest benefactor of the decline of dispensationalism in the United States. And I recognize that, in the Des Moines area of Iowa, most of the churches out there are premillennial dispensational. Yeah, and he goes to a evangelical free church, not covenant church. That's a different denomination with a very similar backstory. But the evangelical free church, despite their Swedish roots, were in large part a premillennial dispensationalist denomination for a long while on paper. Now they're not as strict on that anymore, but for a while they were. Anyway, the Left Behind theology sucks. The modern nation state of Israel is not the real Israel. And that's really all I got. And that's not a bad argument. Steve was copping out. He was copping out. He's trying to use semantics to cop out. God determines what's theologically significant. And if it's incorrect, it's not theologically significant. If our views, no matter how dogmatic, no matter how popular, no matter how many wars we start to supposedly defend Israel, invading Iraq, they use Israel as a reason for that, one of the reasons for that, that doesn't change the fact that what they did was over something theologically insignificant because it was not of God. So, the character of God is theologically significant. False doctrine is perceived. Well, false doctrine is not necessarily insignificant because it's challenging a real doctrine, but this is a canard of theology, a backward step in our understanding of Scripture. And the byproduct of that, the modern day nation state of Israel, we have elevated to a pedestal that is unbiblical. I don't think America is super theologically significant either. I don't think Israel is. I don't think China is. I don't think Fiji is. We're all on the same level here. We're all nations. That's the point. And, if people wrongly attributed significance where it was wrongly applied, that doesn't change the reality of the insignificance. So that's all I got to say about that. My name is Ray. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. If you like this, do also subscribe and like the video as well. And check out Evangelical Dark Web. This is more of a Christian news and commentary rather than a theological debate channel. But nonetheless, that was a cop-out on a, just an argument starting premise that I've forwarded. So that was a cop-out. Steve Deace should admit that it's a cop-out. I'm not dissing Steve Deace. I actually watch him every day. Definitely one of my favorite political commentators. I highly recommend because there are not many Christian political commentators out there. They're growing, but they're not as many big Christian political commentators out there. You look at, the Daily Wire doesn't really have a strong Christian presence. The Blaze at least allows it. They have some degenerates, but they at least allow a Christian presence, and I appreciate that. Otherwise, have a blessed day, and I will catch you on the next one.